Hi, everyone. I'm Yan.
I'm Steph.
And this is our podcast, Bushwick Famous, where we talk about the music industry from a critical perspective. And
Today we have the lovely Emily as our guest. Emily, no last name provided, like Madonna or Cher. And Emily, what are we talking about today?
We're going to be talking about Christian rock, or the technical term being contemporary Christian music, which would encompass rock, pop, and also worship music, if we want to touch on that. For context.
There's a whole Venn diagram going on here.
Yeah.
Okay, so Emily, what is your background here that makes you qualified to speak on this?
Yeah, qualifications include listening to a, no pun intended, ungodly amount of Christian pop and rock,
even if unintended.
Pop and rock in like the early to mid 2000s, as well as a Bachelor of Arts in Communication with minors in both biblical studies and music.
That is true.
Yeah.
So how did you end up with a minor in biblical studies, Emily?
I went to an evangelical college, so that was kind of just like
necessary.
There. Yeah, yes, that was just part of it. And then the music piece, I do have to just say, I think that I have a double major. The only reason that I don't have a major in music is because I didn't do a recital. So that was, I spent more time on that than the biblical studies part. But,
fair enough.
Yeah.
What did you play?
Piano.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And so you grew up evangelical.
Yes.
I take it. It's
Yeah,
fair to say on the podcast.
Yep, and went to a small private Christian university in Southern California. That was kind of like known for its music department, was like one of their big things there.
Cool.
Yeah,
that explains why you and your husband, who I will not name, I guess. Anyways, you and Robert met there.
Yes.
And that makes sense because he was in vocal performance.
Yes. Yeah, we met as I was exiting the music department for something that wouldn't require me to teach music because I realized I didn't want to do that.
Valid.
As he was entering the music department.
Okay.
Because he did want to do that.
Yeah.
I guess.
Fair.
Okay. So that's the background. And for context, the reason why we have you on is that Yan and I both know absolutely fucking nothing about this. I was raised by two ex-Catholics and then just around a bunch of Jewish people. And then my mother converted to Tibetan Buddhism. So I know a lot about Judaism.
Yeah.
And very, very little about either Catholicism or Protestantism of any sort, of which evangelicalism is a form of Protestantism. There's a lot of isms.
Yes.
And then Yan,
I'm just fully Jewish. Like
100%.
It's concerning to a degree.
I'm like lightly dusted with Judaism. You're like the real thing.
The real thing, born and raised.
I'm so happy it's so rare that this knowledge feels relevant. I'm so glad.
We're interesting.
So we're interesting. So this is so fantastic. Happy to be of service.
Well, so Emily and I are good friends, and we talk fairly often. Like, you will tell me some sort of story from your childhood, and I will react with complete shock and horror because not because anything like particularly tragic happened, but just like I don't understand evangelical world.
Sure.
And it's even among Christians, I assume people watching know this, but I didn't fucking know this until a few years ago. Protestantism and Catholicism are very fucking different. They approach things very fucking differently. And even just like culturally, there's a lot of difference there. The history of Christian music is obviously, I went to art school. Most of the art before like the 1900s was just straight up Bible art of some sort or another. Bible fanfic, so to speak. So like obviously Christianity has been influencing music and art of all stripes, I think it's fair to say, basically since it was invented. And then, in the 1900s, we had sort of a greater strain of secular music occurring. And I have written down some notes here from that New Yorker article that you directed me to. It's titled The Unlikely Endurance of Christian Rock, which is fair, I think. So Martin Luther King wrote in Ebony, the magazine, that rock and gospel are totally incompatible. The profound sacred and spiritual meaning of the great music of the church must never be mixed with the transitory quality of rock and roll music. On the other hand, many pioneering rock and rollers, from Sister Rosetta Tharpe to Jerry Lee Lewis, came out of the Pentecostal church, which, Emily, where in my mental map of Christianity is the Pentecostal church? Because I don't know.
So that would be a denomination. This is somewhat limited because I never went to a Pentecostal church.
Sure,
but if you're thinking in terms of
right?
The what?
Like snake handling Pentecostals?
Maybe. I don't know.
Okay,
here's the spectrum that I think of it as is like Baptists, which is like the church I went to growing up was Baptist, would be more like organ music, hymns, etc. Pentecostal tended to be more like holy rollers. So like you might get like speaking in tongues, a little bit more
right.
vibes based.
The crazier stuff, kind of. Yeah, speaking in tongues.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Perhaps the more exciting and entertaining depending on how you're looking at it. But yeah, that would be kind of the...
One would argue.
Yeah.
I would argue. No offense.
But that could explain also why they were
rockers.
More likely to, enter that particular genre.
Yeah, I think just generally if you sort of have that experience like dropping out of your body in a way enough to like be speaking gibberish fluently, you probably can get like unself-conscious enough to do some rock and roll. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
I literally have a note here, ask Emily to elaborate difference between Pentecostal and Baptist.
That's how I was that was my perception, at least like growing up between the two.
And we are, I think, really interested in your perception here because again, like the sort of, I can write a little history of Christian rock or whatever. I don't think that would be super interesting to hear from me, but like the actual place of it in your life and your community is way more interesting, I think, which is why I'm just trying to run through a little bit of history here. Various other things people have said about rock and roll. King argued that rock and roll was worrisome precisely because its frenetic performances evoked the excesses of Pentecostal worship. There you go. That's your point.
Excess.
On King of the Hill, Hank Hill, we're not going in order of anything at this point, confronted a guitar-wielding pastor and delivered an unsparing judgment. Quote, "You're not making Christianity better," he said. "You're just making rock and roll worse." Which is a discussion we will.
I do think, we definitely need to touch on that later.
Me and Emily, at least, have independent theories of why Christian rock is bad that we will be comparing later. Yan has listened to the playlist, but has had a much busier week, so you will chime in with your
so excited
with your
for
thoughts, please.
Objective.
So many questions.
So many questions. So, by the late 60s, the rise of rock had already inspired what Tom Wolfe called, quote, one of the most extraordinary religious fevers of all time, the hippie movement, which, Emily, your family, despite being evangelical, also has some connection to.
Deep ties to, some hippie background. But also rock music, too, because, like, my parents listened to, like, a lot of Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, you said your mom saw Jimi Hendrix, right?
Multiple times, yeah.
So for context, and I hope you're comfortable with me saying that, Emily's parents were basically hippies before they converted to Christianity?
Yes, a little bit later in life. So rock music was a big part of their upbringing.
Very funny to me.
Yeah.
Like, as your parent, like, it's kind of crazy just to go from freewheeling hippie to homeschooling evangelical, like, period.
Yeah, but a lot of, I guess, fun context, though, you know.
It is a lot. It is a very unique background, Emily. I will say that. I have never met anybody else with that background. Wolfe saw the hippie movement, as a faith-based enterprise, and many of its participants would have agreed. Their dominant theology was not atheism, but mysticism. In 1967, one popular evangelist warned young Christians to shun the gospel of LSD, which your parents did not do. They did not shun that appropriately. There were pastors who wanted to convince the hippies that Christianity was fun. A lot of them did this in sort of the youth pastor way of like, hey man, I know a guy who loved, I don't even know, like the youth pastor bit. Like, and that man was Jesus. Arthur Blessitt, the self-proclaimed minister of Sunset Strip, mimicked the conspiratorial patter of an eager drug buddy. If you really want to get turned on, I mean, man, where the trip's heavy, just pray to Jesus. He'll turn you on to the ultimate trip. And it worked. There were a lot of people who were sort of like converted by this. That wouldn't have been the time when your parents were, right? No,
I don't think so.
Late 60s. No. This decentralized revival became the Jesus movement, and its participants known as Jesus Freaks, which is the title of one of the songs on the playlist Emily made for us, which is a crazy fucking song. In 1979, stations began playing My Father's Eyes, a pious ode to good behavior by a precocious teenager named Amy Grant. Grant evolved into the first purposively Christian pop star. So basically, this has been developing, for many decades. And Emily, as we have been talking about it this past week, we have this sort of theory of like a difference between gospel music, Christian rock, and then like popular artists who are Christian but maybe don't lead with it. And these are all sort of like overlapping circles in the Venn diagram, but can you elaborate a little on like, I don't know, what's worship music? Like, I did not grow up going to church.
Yeah. Okay, so I can speak to that. And I can also, the article gives really good context about some of the types of music that would be like Christian rock that served a very different purpose than like that type of music did in the circles I was in. But I'll talk about worship music just because it provides a good juxtaposition to like what is pop rock for Christians. But worship music is more like you're going to church and you're like singing these songs as an act of worship. Very often they'll be pulled directly from the Bible. So like the lyrics will be scripture.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of...
That does not rhyme very well, does it?
It can if you use a thesaurus,
Twist
stuff
it a
like
little
that.
bit.
And then sometimes it doesn't though too. But like old school like hymns that you might hear like sung to an organ or like choral music, stuff like that would be worship music. The like most modern iteration of that would be something like Hillsong. So Hillsong is intended to like be sung to God as an act of worship, but it's kind of also entertaining, whereas Christian pop rock is just for entertainment.
What is Hillsong?
Oh, Hillsong is... It's like a mega church in Australia, I'm pretty sure, but they also, there are documentaries that would explain this better than I did, but they have some interesting weird cult-like tendencies.
Yeah, they're very celebrity.
Yes, they're very celebrity seeker kind of a thing. Yeah, not unlike Scientology in that way, but they're like
Which
evangelical.
you also have personal experience with.
Yeah.
She's not a Scientologist.
Yeah,
Just worked for them.
I guess, yeah. Not for them.
Not
with
for the church.
them.
No, that sounded terrible.
But, yeah, of the many interesting places I found myself. But
They do have a very strange background, Emily.
But Hillsong is worship music, but it's like very contemporary in the sense that like a modern audience would be like, this is more fun to like play and like present to a church than like a super old school type of hymn.
Okay, so it's kind of in between the in between.
It's kind of in between. Like, so you might put that on the car too, or like hear it on a Christian radio station as well. So it is entertaining. But like Christian pop rock is like strictly for entertainment. Like you're not singing that as an act of worship directly to God. It's more of just like, this is within Christian culture, like singing about like Christian issues and like stuff that's going to be relatable.
Being called a Jesus freak.
Being called a Jesus freak, stuff like that. That's kind of the difference between.
Have you heard anything? This is a bit of a tangent. Have you heard anything about Bieber's Coachella performance?
No.
So the main sort of headline, and Yan, feel free to jump in and correct me on this, is that, for his first set at Coachella of 2 sets, he sort of played back a bunch of his old stuff on YouTube and like harmonized with it. And it was, this great big artistic statement if you want to see it that way, or he's depressed if you want to see it that way. I don't know. But he is in Hillsong, I believe, right?
I think so. He's in one of those like mega, like celebrity seeking mega churches. Yeah.
And so I was listening to this podcast. It is normally about conspiracies. I brought this up already in the last podcast we recorded. It is about conspiracies normally, but they had this bonus episode, 2 of us went to Coachella. So they were talking about kind of the overlap there of like Coachella conspiracy theories. And what we just recorded about geese that I told you about earlier, that was kind of one of them. And then another was that some of Bieber's most recent work is very religious because he is, I don't know, I suppose become more open about that as he has aged. And this girl, this TikToker, I guess, was saying like, imagine you're this like really hardcore believing Christian and you are getting like millions of people to sing along to your songs about Jesus with you.
Yeah.
Like, that is such, I think she said that must be such a mitzvah.
Yeah. But I also, that interests me because I never thought about, when I was like listening to Christian pop and Christian rock, like as a teen, preteen during that time, I never thought it being as like a method of evangelism. Like it's literally for Christians because, to our later point, it's typically not going to be enjoyable to other audiences that
We'll discuss why.
Yeah. And like, I mean, I have my own theories, but I find that interesting, right? Because then you could also perceive that as like a form of, oh, you're listening to people like hear this message. And like maybe most Christians feel that way too. I think a lot of Christians would also be skeptical of that in the sense that they're like, oh, is that just like more of an attention seeking thing opposed to like a real act of like authenticity?
Yeah.
Because it is so fame focused.
When I used to do clinic defenses, like, counter protesting the weirdos outside Planned Parenthood, that sort of thing, something that would sort of get brought up in arguments with these guys a lot is like, aren't you supposed to pray privately? Aren't you supposed to not trust like people who pray?
Yes, like are like attention seeking or doing it for like, you're not to do it.
The clout, basically.
Yes, clout chasing, is essentially a bad thing. Which is why Hillsong is so divisive, even within like conservative evangelical circles, is because it's like, well, is this more of a business or like, is it a church? But ultimately, a lot of people think the music is good, so they kind of just play it anyway.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Also, Yan, before we get too far off of this, we were talking about this a bit earlier. There is no basically like equivalent of the Christian music industry for Judaism.
Not that I'm aware of.
Not that I'm aware of.
No. When it comes to Judaism and music, it's so culturally and like religiously, historically as well important that I don't think there was ever a point where there felt like a need or an opportunity to monetize it or corporatize it. I think it's also just like population wise, it is a smaller religion and not as like widespread globally. And I think that played an effect too on the lack of like industry behind the music within Judaism. But it's such an important, significant part culturally. It's also like worship. All prayers are mostly, all of them
Basically
are sung. And for every holiday, day of mourning, every prayer or part of the prayer or part of the story is sung. So it's very, very ingrained in the history and just the root of Judaism.
That's an interesting contrast. I mean, just apart from the industry part, because like, again, I know almost nothing about Christianity, but like you can have a service without singing, right?
Yeah, you could, but you really wouldn't, generally speaking.
In evangelical circles or just everywhere, you think?
I mean, in any like church that I went to or have gone to, like it's, the service is typically like you sing a couple songs up front and then you have like a sermon and you might close with a song too. So like music is a huge piece of it, but like there are like very traditional songs, but it is more going to be influenced by like whatever's popular at the time and stuff, depending on who you're talking to, if that makes sense. Hence more of like a pop influence for something like Hillsong that you would, hear.
Right.
You really wouldn't go to an evangelical church service and not hear some music being played. Yeah.
I mean, just from the perspective of like, these people are in my flock or whatever, and I want them to stay in the flock and enjoy being in the flock, and I'm approaching this in as good faith as I possibly can. The singing in a group is very bonding.
Yeah.
That's something.
Yes. Yeah.
That is actually, Yan, we were talking earlier about cults, and I mentioned that Alcoholics Anonymous, which I've been to, is kind of a cult, but it's a well-intentioned cult. And one of the like many items on the sort of cult checklist that checks off is you chant together. You hold hands and you pray at the end of every meeting. And so you're saying the same thing in unison. That is kind of a cult tactic.
Yeah,
because
totally.
you feel this
togetherness.
Togetherness, communion with the people that you're with. And it's also just very fundamentally human.
Yeah. I do it while we're kind of touching on or dancing around like the purpose of music or like the context of like pop and rock within Christian culture. If you don't mind me taking a minute or two to step kind of outside of the walls of a church, it serves two additional purposes. One is top of mind, the other one I will think of by the time I'm done talking. But one of them is also like a sense of belonging, right? Because if you're in a circle where it's like, okay, there's all this music that has like bad words in it or like it's talking about sinful stuff, like as a kid, having music that is like for you is meaningful in the sense that now you have like a community where you can like listen to something safely. And I think from a parent's perspective, that's probably part of the reason that there was like a big market for it. But then also from like young people listening to music during that time, especially like in the early 2000s when you think about like what rock looked like that time, it was so angsty.
Yeah.
To have like angsty Christian rock.
My emo boys.
Like Christian kids loved, like Christian Mallrats love an emo Christian band. Like that kind of an aesthetic was like very like appealing and stuff. But to have something that you could like buy at a Christian bookstore, I put in quotes, like a very real thing.
You had to explain this concept to me recently.
It's just a bookstore
like,
that's like filled with books by
just
Christians.
Christian stuff?
Or you can like buy Bibles and stuff, but like they would have like whole rows of like CDs with like headphones you could like listen to.
I mean, they would stock novels and stuff, surely, right? But like written by, approved by?
Yeah, yes, like maybe...
Like your friend who writes closed-door romance novels?
Yeah. Maybe not even though like a romance section. It would be more like educational stuff. But they did have the music and like you would know it was like kind of like a bigger, more commercial Christian bookstore if they had Evanescence. So...
A more commercial bookstore would have Evanescence.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. All that to say, if there's like an element of safety to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, real quick before we get off Evanescence, they would sort of be in our third category, right? Which is like undercover Christians.
Yeah. Undercover Loki. It's up to Christians. Like, oh, we all know that that's a mainstream Christian band.
Yeah, exactly. Emily made a playlist for us to listen to get a sort of handle on what was going on here. And there were a couple bands we were talking about that I was like, I did not fucking know that. Like, there's no way.
And I was surprised to hear you say that because I'm like, I would have only ever heard that on a Christian radio station.
Yeah, and then there's an even further version of it where like even further on the scale where like I think Hayley Williams is like known to be very religious, but it's like I'm sure it guides what she does. She's like open about it, but doesn't obviously seem to be reflected in her work, at least to me. So it's there's quite the spectrum here, I guess, is what we're getting at. And then to like your in-group thing, I mean, I think that's true of most music subcultures, right?
Totally.
Like we hang out with other rock people because we're fucking weirdos. who like rock, and it's like, it's its own subculture. It's very different from like mainstream culture. So I think, that drives a lot of genres, subgenres, subcultures, really.
Yeah, and then there's also that element of like, it's appropriate, like there isn't going to be quote bad stuff in it, but then it also reinforces like pieces of Christian identity that are less appealing, right? So like the Jesus Freak song is like
Freak.
unfortunately almost a bop. Like the lyrics are crazy.
Okay, wait, I'm gonna pull up the lyrics on it right now.
Sorry.
Okay, that was.
I have no
one.
objectivity
Here's
because
the
like
thing.
I've listened to it growing up,
Here's
so I'm
the
like,
thing. That's the first song on your
Yeah.
list,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
When I started listening to it, 10 seconds in, I wrote to Emily, okay, Jesus Freak is kind of a bop, and then like. Immediately it like becomes a totally different song.
Yes.
And it like that fucking song contains within it at least like 3 different songs. And at the end I was like, is this still the song that I thought was a bop? Oh my god, like there's no musical connective tissue there. It's very bizarre.
But, no, I did include it at the beginning for a reason, but I'm curious to hear you wanted to bring up lyrics.
I do. I really do. What will people think when they hear that I'm a Jesus freak? Which is, by the way, like, what will people think when they hear that I'm a Jesus? Like, it's very, like, punched out.
Yes.
And then, what will people do if they find out it's true?
Like, all your friends are gossiping about you being a Jesus freak.
Right? Like, what the fuck? I cut myself clean from a past that comes back in my darkest of dreams. So, like, we have a dark past. We're, like, getting off of drugs or something. Oh, and this I also texted you about. I saw a man with a tat on his big fat belly. It wiggled around like marmalade jelly. It took me a while to catch what it said because I had to match the rhythm of his belly with my head. Well, I didn't even catch that lyric as it went by. Jesus saves is what it raved in a typical tattoo green. What is a typical tattoo green? You don't see green a lot in tattoos.
I think like
It's when
like
the
older
black
tattoo ink
fades into
like
green.
fades. I can break this down for you about why these lyrics are the way they are.
Okay, let's
So
go
like
line by line.
the concept. So imagine that you're like 13 or 14 years old and you do not have a dark past because you've been going to
But you're angsty.
you've been going to
You want
vacation
have
Bible school
one.
your entire life, right? And you like so badly want to be angsty, and like so it creates this image in your mind that's like, yeah, people are like talking about you like so and so's a Jesus freak.
I need
but
to be
you're like
persecuted for
yes,
something.
and it's like reclaiming this identity that was like never taken away because you're a child. But, like, so there's that, but then there's also this element of like, oh, I have this past, but like then I was saved, and you like see this guy, and you like judge him on the outside, and you realize like, oh no,
he's got a belly that wiggles like
because he's got a jelly belly.
Which I texted Emily and was like, is this Santa Claus?
Yeah, exactly. But like, so you like judge this person on the outside, and he looks like maybe a little bit hardcore for church, but then he has this tattoo that says like Jesus saves or whatever. And so it's like, don't judge people like he's like a Jesus freak. Like he's cool, and like you can be too.
Okay, so, now explain to me kamikaze, my death is gain.
I think it's kind of like playing on the like whole like theme or like motif of sacrifice that is throughout of like any Christian media, saying in the sense it's like my reputation doesn't matter because it's for the greater good. If like people are calling me a Jesus freak and they're like judging me for it, that's fine because at least I'm like furthering the message.
Interesting.
Strong lyrics.
I don't really know if you are. Okay, this is just getting more like like going door to door, say in Mormonism.
Yeah.
I've read several theories that it doesn't really convert many people, obviously, because no one wants that. But what it does do, and what is more expected of it by the church, is that it reinforces to the missionaries that they are sort of alone, and that these secular people will not accept them, and that drives you further back into the group.
It's also a direct command that is like you have to go tell people about this.
Right, it's in the name.
Yeah.
Evangelizing.
Yes, exactly. So but Mormons tend to take that like extremely literally.
Yeah. The rest of these lyrics are basically like summarizing, like it's describing Jesus, like, oh, he was walking in the desert and everyone thought he was dirty and gross. It says he ate locusts, which I don't enjoy on his behalf. This was one of my favorite parts. People say I'm strange. Does it make me a stranger that my best friend was born in a manger? Boom.
Wow.
Mic drop.
Lines, lyrics, bars,
spit. Bars,
this was an extremely popular song.
I believe you, because like it does kind of start off with a banger riff.
Yeah, it does, and then it also like
I like pop punk. I don't know. What do you want from me?
At least like see how we're like having a conversation about the lyrics, because some of the other music on that playlist mostly artists I absolutely loved in my younger days are more two-dimensional in the sense that it's like a little bit harder to listen to.
I need to pull up the Breakfast one. What is it called? Breakfast?
Breakfast by the Newsboys.
This is an
loved
insane fucking song.
Okay, but that song I included to lull you into a false sense of security.
And it didn't work because I was freaked the fuck out by it.
But that song and Jesus Freak are like kind of self-aware in the sense that like this is crazy. The lyrics are, right?
I was texting you that. I was like, how self-aware is this? Because this is fucking bonkers.
The Newsboys are pretty self-aware.
So the lyrics to this song, Breakfast by the Newsboys, starts, hold the milk, put back the sugar, they are powerless to console. We're gathered here to sprinkle ashes from our late friend's cereal bowl. Breakfast clubbers say the motto that he taught us to repeat. You will lose it in your gym class if you wait till noon to eat. So this is breakfast, but also death.
Yes.
Back when the chess club said our eggs were soft, every Monday he'd say grace and hold our juice aloft, so the dead friend. Oh, none of us knew his checkout time would come so soon, but before his brain stopped waving, he composed this tune. Chorus, when the toast is burned and all the milk has turned and Captain Crunch is waving farewell, when the big one finds you, may this song remind you that they don't serve breakfast in hell. I'm just lost on where what the connection with the breakfast, like that seemed to just be a theme that they chose.
I think it's just a silly theme.
It's silly, but it's also so explicitly like, you're going to go to hell. And it's very jarring to me, the contradiction there.
Yeah. But I think that's why it's self-aware, is because like that's such a jarring topic and they're treating it with such like lightness that it's like ironic.
Yeah, I guess.
You know, I think that's the thing. Yeah.
I'm not as attuned to Christian irony as you are. Oh,
Yeah.
and then verse 2, I would like to add this. Breakfast clubbers drop the hankies. I don't know what that means. Though to some our friend was odd, that day he bought those pine pajamas, his check was good with God. A coffin. We are calling it coffin pine pajamas.
Yes. Yeah.
I find this incredibly disturbing. Oh, and then this is addressed to non-believers. Those here without the Lord, how do you cope? For this morning we don't mourn like those who have no hope. Oh, rise up, Fruit Loop lovers. I would like to say, we're Fruit Loops. You guys don't get that. Sing out sweet and low. With spoons held high, we bid our brother cheerio. Clever pun. I'll give them that. The cheerio was good.
Yeah.
I actually have a somewhat deeper thought on this, which is we were talking about Erica Kirk and why she's crazy. And I believe you said something along the lines of like, well, not only does she believe that Charlie is in heaven, but it is her job now in her mind to keep evangelizing and to like not mourn in that way, because if you do mourn very publicly, then that is sort of evidence that you don't believe as strongly as you should.
I don't know.
Is this a perspective that you gave to me, or was that someone else?
I don't know. We may have touched on this briefly, but I don't think that that's like explicitly said in any capacity necessarily. And there's like a lot of like, I mean, there's just like a lot of layers to unpack there. But there is this concept of like death is also celebratory.
Sure, and I don't have any truck with that generally.
Yeah.
I think Judaism has some similar concepts.
Yeah. So I don't know in that situation if I'm like, I don't know if I have like a really strong and fast opinion on it, but yes, kind of.
Yes, kind of.
Maybe.
Is it like, do you think this attitude of like, oh, we're not mourning like other people because we know he's safe with Jesus in heaven? Like, do you think that can be destructive? Because it feels to me like it could.
I think it could be, but I think the more common response would be like feeling anxious and sad for people who don't have that.
Sure.
People like more like taking pity on.
And that drives your evangelizing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like there's an earnest motivation there. I think it would be more of like we mourn more heavily for someone who's like gone.
Oh yeah, okay, right.
You know?
So that makes sense, but then also I guess my point is that the mourning that you feel, that is not really up to you, the degree that you get it,
Totally.
right? So
Yes.
it's like,
Yeah, totally.
Would you feel like you were a bad believer if you were like genuinely very distraught?
I don't know. I can't speak to it personally because like I couldn't say. But I think that there would be I think in that situation, like if you were having those feelings as if like grief would somehow pass you by.
Sure.
But you would go to like talking to other Christians would probably reinforce this like everything happens for a reason. There would be like a lot of like comforting spirituality that would be kind of injected back into it. So it's not like, I don't think anyone's discouraged from being sad necessarily, but there would be more of like an optimism that it's kind of like packaged in and given back to you. Yeah.
So I would say, Yan, again, pull me up if I'm off base on this, but the sort of like Jewish parallel that I'm thinking of specifically is the phrase, may their memory be a blessing, which, you know, is usually reserved for like people of note or who have done some sort of like civil rights minded, like community minded thing. Am I off base on this?
No, I think that's generally the sentiment that, you know, is used, but I think it also is generally applied to anyone and everyone within the Jewish community.
That's
it's
fair.
not like restricted to just...
I don't know why I had that idea in my head.
It might be more commonly used when it comes to obviously people that have had a more substantial effect on Jewish movement or Jewish communities. And
I think maybe I've seen it applied to like Gentile, like civil rights leaders, basically. It's like, okay, well, you know, because of their good works, like they're sort of included in this thought. You know, of course, everybody would be, but you get what I'm getting at?
Definitely.
And then also, I mean, just to keep on this track, again, I am not Jewish. My parts of my family are. There is not a focus on heaven, right? Or like the afterlife in Judaism. It's to my understanding is very much more focused on like what are we doing right here, right now?
Absolutely. There is no like concept of heaven and hell in Judaism or like the devil or whatever in that capacity. So yeah, it's heavily focused on our actions in our lifetime and what we do to serve our community and the world alive, as opposed to like trying to make you to do something good with the idea that there's some sort of benefit in the afterlife.
Right. Which is another thing that we talk about a lot with Catholicism versus evangelicalism is like, because in Catholicism, again, no one here can pull me up on it, but like you repent for your sins and you're sort of good. And the concept of
with
this,
the added layer of purgatory,
right?
I'm not an authority on this, but like,
I think if you confess, you're fine anyway. Like if you have Jesus in your heart, you know. And what you've described to me about evangelicalism, the way that you have described this concept to me within your previous church is very confusing to me. Can you sort of go over it?
Yeah, so like the concept of like salvation, this is from like a Protestant versus Catholic perspective, like how I would think about it based on like how I grew up and also the school I went to. But so like with Protestantism, you're saved, but no action that you take can contribute to that. So it's like pure grace on God's part, right? Because Jesus paid that price. Right? Whereas, but then there's kind of an added layer of like, but if you're choosing to like accept that gift, is that an action on your part? So like there are some Christians who would say like that, no, you can't ever choose it. You're either predestined or you're not, which is a scarier concept, especially if we're all listening to Breakfast by the Newsboys, where it's like, well, what can I do? You know, but then there's another thing where it's like, okay, there's I think a larger body of like Christians who would accept the idea that you choose to accept Jesus and like that's all you have to do.
That's kind of what I hear the most.
That's the most mainstream. Yes, yeah, and that it's also like makes the most sense as far as like human experience is concerned too. You know, like people have agency. Like we're not denying that.
Right. Yeah. It's also reasonably close to the Catholic perception.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, you know, you own up to it. Accept Jesus into your heart. You're fine.
Yeah, and I think where Protestants and Catholics differ, or where Protestants think they differ with Catholics, would perhaps be more accurate.
You're so much better than us.
I think that like I always had the impression of Catholicism as being like it is more works based in the sense that there's a lot more like liturgical overhead, and that like you have like the rosary and like all the you have to do confessional and stuff like that. With like Baptists, like you're not doing confessional because you don't need to.
Yeah.
You're just good.
Hold that guilt inside.
You just hang on. But technically, you're not supposed to. It's just supposed to be like.
And yet, Emily.
And yet, here we are. But like that's like the difference, or like the understanding is the difference between the two, which I think is where purgatory comes in, because if you have an unconfessed sin, you're supposed to like kind of pay it off after the fact. Whereas like a Protestant belief system would be like, well, there's no need for that. Like it's already been, it's paid in full. It's paid in full up front. Where It's like paid in full up front kind of a thing. You just have to like choose to accept the gift, unless you believe in predestination, in which case you can't.
In which case you're fucked.
To it. Yeah, well, or not.
If you believe in predestination, okay, this is another. I've asked you about this before, and your answer amuses me. If you believe in predestination, could I hypothetically like go, murder someone or whatever, and if I'm predestined to go to heaven already, would I still? And I think your answer multiple times has been like, yes, but you would never do that.
But you wouldn't do
you're
it.
A good Christian.
You wouldn't do it because at that point, like if you're predestined, so like a lot of the music that you'll listen to has these really strong themes of like before and after. So you'll reach this point where you like are led to God and like your motivations change at that point.
Okay.
So using my parents as an example would be like hippie to evangelical pipeline, a very fast turnaround in motivations change. Exactly. But like, so like there's a motivation change, right? Like, so then you're not going to be out and about murdering at your whim because you wouldn't want to.
Right.
Which creates tricky gray areas because it's like, but like, what if I want to listen to Avril Lavigne? Like, am I going to home for that? Because like, it's kind of more exciting.
Basically the same as
some of what I'm being offered. Yeah. But there's also something, and maybe I don't want to like I don't know, I don't want to go too much in a different direction, but a lot of that music too, of the like Christian pop and stuff, like it's safe, but it also is like has positive messaging in the sense that it's stuff like in the 2000s, like when you think about like how body positivity and stuff like that truly did not exist at the time. But a lot of those bands that like I was listening to, and like I went to concerts like at churches, right? Which is
another whole thing I want to get into. Yeah.
Yeah.
Continue.
So like going to like a show like at a church, and you'd have these like Christian pop singers up there talking about how they like overcame disordered eating or something like that in like a very positive and like in a good way. So like that type of messaging was also somewhat prevalent in this music during that time too. So it wasn't always like, are you going to hell or not kind of a thing. It was also good,
right,
and that has a positive message,
right? Approaching from good faith. Yeah, I'm sure the vast majority of the people we're talking about genuinely believe this and want to sort of do good with
and
their
like
influence,
earnestly,
which,
and they're like
you can only say is admirable.
Exactly, and they would like attribute those positive changes in their life to their spirituality.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Couple questions. What's a concert in a church like? Number one. Number two, before you answer, are these the bigger artists that are on these labels that are playing in a church, or are they local people? Is there a local scene of like small Christian bands?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so. No, I never. It was. I think it's a kind of a small scene.
You think they get, do they get like put together? You might not know that it's more of an industry thing. Do you think they get put together by the labels? Like some bands? Some bands are. Don't look at me like that.
Wait, what do you mean? No. What does that mean?
Like you find someone who's a great singer and you're like, great, okay, we're gonna buy these songs off of a songwriter, and then we'll find you a guitar, like my colleague, plays the guitar, and we'll get him in here. We have this great session bassist, we'll get him in here, and that's the band. And it's not like, oh, my buddy Yan and I decided that we wanted to write some songs with some synth in them, and now like it's not organically formed, so to speak.
I'm guessing it's organically formed a lot of the time because maybe I'm discrediting the level of infrastructure this music scene had at the time. But yeah, I couldn't tell. I don't know. Okay. But I can speak to what it was like to go to those concerts because like in like high school, I loved going to a concert, and they weren't always at churches, but churches often hosted them.
I think we would have been great friends in high school because I was going to ska shows and then weird punk shows at the Democracy Center in Harvard Square.
Interesting. Okay.
Community house.
Definitely not an experience that I had at the same age. But the first concert I went to answer your question, they were not always in churches. Those would be like smaller ones because like a church could accommodate it. I think the largest like church concert I went to would have been about the size, to make it locally relatable, of like Brooklyn Steel, but it's all like seating, right? Because it's a church with like pews or chairs.
Allowed to dance?
Yeah, people would be like standing up and moving around. Yeah.
But, okay.
Or like clapping. So like think about, because these types of...
allowed to dance? I'm like, is this the town from
Is this permitted? No, not quite, right? Like this is like Christians having fun.
Christians having fun?
You got a merch table up front.
Merch table?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Oh, wait, what do Christian band t-shirts look like?
That's such a good question, and I don't know if I ever had that many.
Okay, name a band. I need to see this. Name a band.
Look up the band Hawk Nelson.
I
They were
know
like the
that
boy
name.
band. They're like boy bandy.
There's, okay, and this, again, broader point here, but as we were saying, I'm like, this is like an alternate universe version of like the music industry where there's like, we have boy bands, there is one Christian boy band, we have pop stars, there are a couple
Yes.
Christian pop stars.
There are a few. I included at least 3 boy band, what I would consider like boy bands or felt like boy bands at the time. But yeah, a lot of these bands had merch. I had my messenger bag with pins all over it that I had gotten mostly at concerts and stuff.
I don't know why this says Hawk Nelson. I think you said boy band as I was typing, and I actually
boy
Googled
t-shirt.
Hawk Nelson boy t-shirt. Hawk Nelson is my friend, just pink
Just pink.
text. I think that's Helvetica, which, by the way, this is a type of shirt I'm always trying to pitch to bands, which is just a weird non sequitur sentence. Our friends Mary Shelley, they have a song called Bourgeois de Vie, and I think they should really just sell fucking t-shirts that say Bourgeois de Vie, and it would be great and hilarious, and you can have the band name like tiny down the middle. That's like the graphic t-shirt trend where you know, it just says like Diva or whatever, right? Like it's funny.
Look up Skillet band merch.
Skillet,
They're more
and
of like a heavy rock.
I think I liked them in your playlist, right?
I really liked Skillet. Yeah, see?
Yeah, see, I wouldn't immediately clock this
The cool
as,
kids listened to Skillet.
as religious music. Although that is an interesting design.
They're like still around too. I did a little like Reddit recon. I'm like, what are the kids listening to these days? And it's not like there's a ton of new Christian bands, but a lot of them are still making music.
Interesting. That's kind of like ska, frankly.
But yeah, so Skillet would have merch, stuff like that. I never went to a Skillet show, but all that to say, it's basically like you go in, like the Sanctuary was a stage.
Related searches, Skillet shirts, Hot Topic.
Hot Topic, there you go.
Is
yeah.
the Sanctuary the bit up front?
That would be the stage. The Sanctuary is like where you gather, and there's a
the
bunch of
Sanctuary is
chairs
the whole
looking
thing.
at a stage.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Also, when my parents did have me go to church until I was 6 and got bored of it, we went to a Unitarian Universalist church, which is, of course, the fake and gay church. And what I recall of that church is like, you know, it's church-shaped. It's got the pews, and it's got the high ceilings and the stained glass windows, and, you know, most of my mental conception of a church is like a Catholic church of the type that made Protestants protest because it's fucking idolatry, which is why like Catholicism has cooler aesthetics. I think
It does, absolutely. The churches I was seeing shows in did not look like that. It would be more like conference seating.
Conference room
Seating,
That
kind
was sort
of,
where
with
I was
like a
leading
cross
up
up
to
front
there.
and like a pulpit and stuff. But like, the thing is, think about it, they're actually kind of perfect for concerts because there's literally a band on stage every single week.
That is true.
Playing music. So like there's a sound system, like all of that exists. It's like very easy to like have someone come in on like a Wednesday night and do like a show.
Do you think any of the in-house church bands, so to speak, ever became like
Hillsong.
band bands? Yeah.
Hillsong is that.
Oh, okay.
They're the churches. They're that church's band.
I don't think I even realized
sell their
until
music.
just now that Hillsong was also a band and sold music. I knew it was a church.
It's more the band than the church. That's how I knew
That's
them.
incredibly bizarre
Yeah.
to me. No offense.
Yeah, that's like the music is from their church's worship band.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
I got it now, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you find out about these concerts? Is it word of mouth at church? Are there flyers? MySpace?
I, in high school, would be Googling and just like following my favorite bands, being like, who's on tour?
Legit.
Like tour for like this band, that kind of thing. Just like you go to their website and you look it up.
Would the
proactively.
church be advertising these
Yeah, totally.
shows?
Yeah.
Okay. I wonder.
But I think they were just cheap venues. Like,
Right, I'm sure. I wonder. I was about to say. I wonder what cut a church might have.
yeah, I have
taken,
no
'cause
idea.
I know. In AA, I think a lot of the time you do pay the church a
Yeah.
little bit to
No,
like use their rec room.
A lot of
basically.
churches make money that way or pay some bills that way.
I will refrain from comment on that.
I can't imagine they're making that much because like
That's true.
they're not.
That's not the problem.
But not every concert was in a place like that. Like I would go to like, I don't know, places that do
like real venues,
actual
I imagine,
venues,
yeah.
not like rock band venues, but like stadium type venues and
Really?
stuff. Yeah, stuff like that. If it
Who's
was
filling up stadium?
off the top of my head, I could not tell you. DC Talk probably would have.
Skillet, DC Talk,
Maybe
Hawk
Skillet. I don't know. Hawk Nelson probably not.
Nelson? Stadium is a big call.
Stadium, or even like if there was like a big like Christian conference or like crusade type of a thing, they would call them.
What's
like
a
Billy
crusade
Graham,
type?
like a Billy Graham thing.
What the fuck are you talking about?
It's like preaching.
Why
and
do you
then there's
call it a
music.
crusade? People died in those.
When I said it out loud, I actually asked myself the same question. I just haven't recalled that word to mind for a long time. But like the Billy Graham crusade would be like evangelizing. And they would just like fill up stadiums with a bunch of people with like really fiery preaching, and there would often be like music accompanying.
That's so fucking dark, dude.
Yeah, I
Calling
never
it
went
the
to one.
crusade?
I never went to one, but yeah, now that you say it
Oh
out
my
loud, yeah,
I mean-
a little odd on the marketing.
So we've taken a break due to the camera only recording a certain amount, and as promised, we are going to discuss why Christian music is bad. Emily, what is your theory?
Yeah, I think. Well, okay, my theory is, and like, bad is like a big generalizing statement.
I was being
but
dramatic.
It does have that feeling of like
It's distinct.
a feeling diluted, or like it's not. It's like you could drink juice, or you could like drink a LaCroix, and it's definitely just essence of something, right?
Yes.
While from like the perspective of the people creating it, like still like talking about these very important issues. So like, why is it not connecting the dots? Why does it not feel like good art, right?
Yeah.
But the question is bigger than this, and I won't spend too much time giving context before I tell you why I think this. But I think the same thing goes for like, why do like movies, like contemporary Christian movies and stuff feel that way, which do exist, by the way. I personally have not seen them, but I've seen enough to be like, okay, that's
cannot speak to this.
Something about it just like does not feel like art. Like, why isn't it landing?
Yeah.
And it's rare that you find like writing or like authors that, unless like specifically for that audience and that audience enjoys it, like it doesn't feel like it's in dialogue with any other stuff out there, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And I think that is kind of my theory as to like why it doesn't land, is that in order for like any art, but like music being what we're talking about here, to be like interesting or engaging, you have to have some kind of like competing ideas. Because like that's, now I'm gonna get all, I just like talking about this stuff. But like, if you're going to develop an intellect, you have to like consume a bunch of stuff, right? You have to read a bunch of things, listen to a bunch of things, like look at a bunch of art, create a bunch of art. Yeah. And then eventually you like build up all of these ideas and they start reflecting off of each other.
You can't only have one input.
Yes. And like when you have something where like we all know how this, like the conclusion this is going to arrive at, it's going to feel one-dimensional.
Okay.
But then layered on top of that, you might have the fear of inappropriate content, because I think it's really hard for a lot of Christians to understand the difference between like talking about something they would view as like sinful and adopting that into their own, like, is it wrong for me to write a song about XYZ? Well, so I'm just not going to discuss it. So it ends up being like very
about
one
Jesus.
note.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, here's the thing. I find like it can be about Jesus in a compelling manner, but like worship music accomplishes that better than any Christian pop rock does.
Interesting.
Because it's not trying so hard. It's like literally serving its purpose, right? Whereas like Christian pop and rock is just like Jesus Freak being, I would describe probably one of the more compelling songs on that playlist. Or like Breakfast, that's at least ironic, right? But then some of it is just like, you know, it feels really one note, because it's so like narrow in its ability to talk about things.
I mean, topic, I will say premarital sex is what about 90% of music is about, I would say.
There is one song that comes to mind that may or may not have been on that playlist. I can't remember. But one of the artists who was like the evangelical Avril Lavigne of the time, her name was Crystal Myers. I was obsessed with all of her music. Her last album is like kind of secular, and then she just like disappeared. Yeah. But there was one that like the opening lyric is is something about like she's like finding love in the back of the car, like when is it gone too far, kind of a thing, where it's like don't have sex. But like it was Crystal. Edgy. Yeah. But like it was edgy, but it was like a cautionary tale.
Okay. And like a morality play.
Yes, it was like a morality thing that was like moralizing the situation. Code. Yeah. So that's the only way you can talk about it. Or like that Anne Boleyn song you mentioned, who they're very...
What was the Anne Boleyn song I liked?
The one you were like, I actually kind of fuck with this song, is clearly talking about some guy cheating on his wife. Yes. And being like, this was my biggest mistake.
The feel-good drag.
The feel-good drag.
Yes, the title, I was like, is this about jerking off? And you were like, no, it is about fucking though.
No, yeah. But that's how that band gets away with it. But Anne Boleyn is also like that in-between space, which we didn't touch on too much, and I don't think we necessarily need to, is that in-between space where it's like people who are not Christians are like, that's a Christian band, and Christians are like, that's a secular banned by Christians.
Right.
That like
Interesting.
very narrow slice of like both parties are listening to it. But that's kind of like why I think it often doesn't feel like art. It feels like a very one-dimensional like regurgitation of ideas that feel safe to this particular audience.
That's interesting because my theory is actually incredibly different.
I would love to hear
different.
it.
As I was listening to the playlist, I caught a lot of times where the lyrics could have flowed better or sounded better, made more sense, not made more sense, but like rhymed better, worked with the melody better, worked with the instrumentation better if something minor was changed, or if like some, very small thing, like if, something that I think most musicians would not really think twice about, but because these musicians are coming at it from a point of like the message is so important, the lyrics are so important, the rest of the song is subservient to that. So
That could be it too.
I think we're probably both right, frankly, but like a lot of people write lyrics first, obviously, but like if you're really dead set on what you're saying, you can sacrifice that sort of like, does the rhythm, does the flow of this line make sense in a way that is, I think, noticeable if you're listening for it. But I think that in a lot of these musicians' minds, this is my theory, that the lyrics being precisely how they are, how they want them to be to communicate the right message does sort of take precedence over the musicality of the song.
I would be interested to compare notes on those specific instances because there is a specific way that you are supposed to say things. Like there's a specific
exactly.
like phrases and stuff that, like the classic example I use is kind of silly, is like you don't say fortunate, you say blessed, because blessed would directly communicate the like providence of God
is
opposed
involved.
to luck.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So like there's like that's like no one's gonna be like fighting you on that, but like that's how you would just say
it's
it
the
in
norm.
that culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the norm. That's like how you would describe it.
And another sort of corollary of this that I notice, a lot of the vocals are really what we call dry. There's no effects on them. There's no reverb. There's no chorus. And in rock, at least in secular rock, a lot of the time you bury the vocals in the mix. Like you don't even hear them that much because it's sort of just more texture for the song.
Yeah.
Or like David Byrne does this, he'll like come up with a melody and sort of just fill it in with syllables and then like see what words he can make from the syllables, and it just doesn't make any fucking sense. A lot of secular musicians are more concerned with the poetry of the lyrics than the strict meaning or the vibe, the texture. I think from a secular perspective, you hear these very, very dry vocals and you're like, well, something's missing from this song. Like the vocals, I think the word I wrote down is feel anemic.
Yes.
The vocals feel anemic because it's literally like almost every song has chorus and reverb on the vocals. Like it's incredibly bizarre to hear one without it. And a lot of these I think have, if not none, then very, vocals, very minimal. Yeah.
Well, the lyrics are the only thing that make it distinctly Christian.
Exactly.
Like a lot of like Christians would, even if they're like super, super restrictive in what they're listening to, would also listen to symphonies.
Right. Interesting. Okay.
I think that's a really good point, which like I wouldn't notice because I just wouldn't have the same like repertoire.
Right. Which is why I wanted to compare theories.
They're really not receiving any
that
feedback.
too.
They're not really like sharpening each other based on like what's out there.
Not receiving feedback is a good point as well. And then the sort of last point I wanted to make about that is just that, so with these Christian artists, my sort of theory that I'm putting forward is that the specific words of the lyrics supersede the rest of the song for them. Whereas I think with a lot of secular musicians, it's the exact opposite. The really important thing that you're addressing in the song sometimes is just the fact that music fucking works, right?
Yeah.
Like it's amazing. It's a fucking miracle that we can make people dance by like transmitting shockwaves through the air.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy. And the fact that this is like governed by its own laws that sort of like come from the fundamental laws of the universe. The music part of it is what is so important to a lot of secular musicians and what is so interesting. And the lyrics are often almost an afterthought or like fitted from somewhere else, some poem you wrote, and they're just not the important part of the song. It's just a complete opposite, like what you're focusing on, what's important to you, what comes first when you're thinking about the song. Yeah. That was my theory.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that is only a perspective you could have, like being more objective about it, where I'm just like, this is why.
You're like, it's just bad.
I can truly only think of I can't think of musically of any that come to mind, but like it's just so rare that you find art that is strictly motivated by evangelism that turns out well, compared to the like broader sphere.
Also, last point I wrote down, there's a lot of white people rap rock going on.
Yeah, so much of it. So much.
Which is also like very word first, right? Like I have so much I've written down, and kind of at a certain point, this is how 21 Pilots has the vocal style they do. There's nothing you can do other than like kind of rap talk it to get it out.
Some would say the DC talk of mainstream music.
So some might say that.
Some would.
I don't know how 21 Pilots would feel about that. But anyways, Yan, you listened to some of the playlist. Your thoughts?
I mean, very similar to what you have said so far in terms of just how much more value is put towards the lyricism over the musicianship and musicality of it. But also, as someone who, you know, is obviously aware of like Christian values overall from like just an outsider perspective, it was interesting how a lot of the songs that I listened to were almost like threats.
That's a lot of Christianity, I feel.
It just felt like there's a lot of pressure to reach like a specific thing to be considered a good person or a good Christian, as opposed to just being. Like,
and that's probably hard to make good art about at a certain point.
It just felt very, very pressured, which can be heard in like secular music today as well when it comes to just
do drugs,
sure, or like any sort of other pressure when it comes to like societal pressure. But this felt very much more of like, this is the recipe of the things that you need to do. And if you don't follow them, then you're going to hell.
No breakfast there.
No breakfast.
But I do think that's a really, really good point, because back to our earlier note, that's a very interesting takeaway. And also, like I'm thinking of like tons of songs on that playlist where it's like behave in an XYZ manner, when the specifics of like Christianity is not supposed to be about your behavior at all.
Right.
In this, I mean, it is very prescriptive, right? But the actual core message is supposed to be like, isn't it so wonderful, this like free gift you've been given as humans, right? To, you know, like from God. But instead it's like, don't cheat on your wife. Don't have sex in the back of the car.
Yeah, and it's
but the art falls into that really easily.
Well, and it's still kind of utilizing the threat there, like, or Jesus gave you this great gift, now don't fuck it up.
It is.
You can't have premarital sex because Jesus did this for you. It is very guilty. It's very Jewish mom in many ways. Sacrifice so much for you.
But it's based a lot on the like this list of rules.
Which is inherently restrictive to art.
Restrictive to art, especially because like then if like from like the Christian perspective, it's like, oh, if my art is like discussing these issues, am I like a proponent of them? Does that make me a bad person? Like that kind of a thing. So it's going to be very limited, and your audience is going to have a similar response. It's like, oh, I'm consuming this, is going to impact me.
Right. Whereas
is that wrong? You know.
Whereas with like secular music, I don't think that question really comes up until we're talking like Swedish black metal that gets people murdered. Like I don't think most people are like, does listening to this make me a bad
is there a value,
person?
a moral statement that can be made? About
maybe
me based on my participation.
Maybe up until we hit like Chris Brown levels or something.
Exactly.
Fuck that guy.
No, great observations.
Yeah. Final thoughts.
It's so weird. It's just so weird. I really
be nice.
I mean, not in a negative way. It's just so different to the music that I think a lot of us are accustomed to.
Sure. Yeah. It's also very different from our cultural upbringing.
Absolutely. So I have nothing else to say.
It is weird. I don't know. It is really odd, but also so fascinating.
It is very fascinating.
Yeah, interesting. And I'll have to revisit the New Yorker article too, because like from my perspective, that kind of music always felt like a form of participation in community for me. And it's like, I can have something that's cool too, because like so much of going to church is not, especially when you're like homeschooled. It's like there's definitely like this identity that's found in like being different and having to be okay with that. So like having something that feels bigger, that's fine. But then also it's just so weird. But knowing that it kind of comes from that like hippie movement, like evangelism,
fascinating, right?
Background was not my experience listening to it as a kid.
You'll have to tell your parents.
But I can see how it came from that, right? Because like it came from this like spirituality Jesus movement mashup.
Well, thank you, Emily, so much for coming on and telling us all about this and explaining very simple things about Christianity to us.
Thank you for letting me yap about something I didn't even know I still had.
Exactly. Yeah, you're a fish in water. Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you so much. You have been great. Yeah. This has been Bushwick Famous. I'm Steph. This is Yan. We'll be back sometime.
Yay!
Yay!